All right, guys, so I wanted to talk to you about, I think, a really important component that you and I kind of need if we really want to make our two things, footage primarily, mostly, for most of us, look a little more cinematic and professional, because I think this is a big one for a lot of us that we kind of ignore a lot of times. And this video is going to be mostly wrapped around this one kind of component with a little 1.5, a little helper, which I just found, and I think it's actually really cool, and I think it's a very worthy add-on for it. Really what we're talking about today, for those that are dealing with both photo and video, me mostly video, but I did take some photos today, is an ND filter, and specifically a variable ND filter. So we're going to take a look at one that I got from K&F, as well as a cool little filter mount that allows us to be able to kind of remove and spin or get that ND filter out of the way when we don't need it. Yeah, let's look at that right now. So I'd normally show you my camera, but it's filming me. But what I do have right now is this here on the table. And I brought a lens. I have this cool little like a mount, which is called a rapid filter system, which actually is pretty cool. And of course my K&F Concept filter. Now I do have the K&F filter online here, and I wanted to show you the one that I actually got. And it's this K&F Concept, and I got a 77mm. And there's a reason I got a 77mm, and it's because my two main lenses that I use almost all the time, which is a 16-35 f4 and a 24-105 f4, both have 77mm filter diameters to them. Getting this one was gonna be able to fit those. And I can get step-up rings, which is what I'll probably end up doing to be able to mount the smaller lenses to this adapter, because I do think this is cool. Now the other reason for this is something that they say, this is a no X spot ND filter, which is cool because a lot of us, when we shoot with ND filters, especially some lesser expensive ones and some mid to high actually, depending on the variable filter that you have and how you're shooting and the width of your lens and all this kind of stuff, you can get this almost like X that shows up in the center of your photo. And you can see it here in their little photo. You can see this K&F Concept, no little X. And then there's this, where's this other, this little like dark line down the center. And you can see those sometimes this way and this way, and it really depends on how the sun is hitting that filter. So this one didn't have that. So I was like, yeah, I like that, because I did buy a lens, and I can't remember who it was from, that I ended up getting that. Not on all the shots, but on some. So I thought this was cool. Of course, you can buy it all the way up to 82mm. My recommendation, of course, is to find the filter diameter of your largest lens, kind of look at that one, and then get step-up rings if you need to. I got this one, $77 basically for this. It's an ND2 to ND32. So you get some adjustments. Now, here it is here. This is the box. You guys can see it. Nice little box. It actually opens up. You get a cool little carry case, which is fantastic. Right now there's nothing in this because it is physically on this already. Now the bonus of this, of course, you can see that it does allow me to actually put my lens cap back on, which is actually quite awesome. So here it is right there. And that's it. You'll see how dark that is. And the other thing that I like for me is that it doesn't matter if the camera is kind of facing this way, like away from you, which is what most of us are doing. But for those of us that are doing things like vlogging, being able to turn this backwards and still see a readout on the actual lens. So you can actually see which way sometimes it is to turn it. So having that ability to spin this and see those little dots on the top as you and I spin forwards or backwards, so that you and I have that ability to kind of know where we are in the range. The other thing you can do too is, hopefully you guys can see it here, is as you spin this, you can see how it brightens and darkens, which is awesome. There's full 32 all the way down to 2, which is cool. And I'll show you just a small little video actually coming up right away with just some of the footage that I shot with this. Now, the big thing for a lot of us is, well, what's the point? If I'm shooting video, I just set it to auto and off I go. And the important thing, and you'll probably have heard of this from a lot of people that shoot a lot of video, is that doubling of your frame rate. So your shutter speed should be double your frame rate. So I shoot primarily in 24 frames, which means that I shoot at 1/50th of a second. If I were to shoot at 30, I should shoot at 1/60th. If I'm shooting at 60 frames, I should shoot at 120. And the reason for that is to be able to get some blur in your shots. Whenever we are filming, especially motion, and especially, not so much motion as the camera travels this way, that's really hard to see any kind of difference between having an ND filter or not, at least I find. But most definitely on anything that's traveling from right to left, left to right. So anything that comes through that. And you'll actually see, I'll put up a drone shot that I took of my drone going by. And what happens is it kind of looks choppy as the image is here, then here, then here. And because it's shooting so fast, it is getting no blur. And those images are locked. They literally look here, and then the next shot's taken here, here, and those frames are really solid. But when you and I shoot with an ND filter on, and we can slow that down, that image, even though it was shot here, has motion blur on it. So that kind of blurs it into the next shot, which just makes it look smoother. I'm gonna show you guys really quick some of the stuff I went out today. I was just shooting a little local hiking path. I went out just for a little bit, and I'll put that on here. All these shots were with this filter on. So take a look. Okay, so we're walking down to take some photos and some videos, and we actually have the ND filter on right now, just so you can kind of see. You can get this nice adjustment here from darkening and lightening it, depending on what you're looking for. Plus, if for it, see, that's too dark. There we go, that's better. When the sun comes out, and if for whatever reason it was a little on the dark side, you can just flip this up, and you can see how bright it gets. So that's kind of cool. All right, we're gonna go take some photos and video. Now, that's not probably overly exciting, but it does show a little bit some of the things you and I can do. One of the things that I always had an issue with, this is again me, maybe it's because I'm sometimes a little bit of a lazy shooter, is that I didn't usually shoot with an ND filter on, variable or not, because I'm like, what happens when I don't want it? And now where do I put it, or I have to take it off or whatever. So I bought this. It's called a rapid filter system, and again, you choose your diameter, so 77 millimeters for me, and it goes on, you can see it here, between the camera and the filter, and you get this cool little lip, and simply you mount that on there, and when you're shooting and you don't want it, you just flip it up, so it's out of the way. Now you're shooting with no filter. When you want it, you're just gonna drop it back on, and you're good. You have your filter, you're rocking and rolling. What more do you want? This is what I was shooting with today, and it was fantastic. I was like, oh yeah, no, this I could find useful. The one thing you have to realize is if you are someone that likes to shoot with a little lens hood, because this is on there now, this makes it actually bigger, and because of that, this just can't fit on top of it. So you are now gonna be lens hoodless. I guess that's just happening. So there it is. One of the things that you'll see, and I'm gonna bring up my computer here. I'm just gonna move this stuff over because talking about it is cool. If we kind of come in here, and I'm gonna open up number one, my Final Cut. I'll kind of show you just kind of two like little clips, just so you can see kind of the difference. A shot like this one here. So this one here is a video. You can see it real fast here, like this, okay? Now the camera doesn't even have much movement, but what I do want you to see, I don't know if I can zoom in, is really just how sharp, and if you go through this frame by frame, there really is not a lot of blur anywhere, especially if you look back here. Those are super sharp shots. They're almost like little photos. right, that were shot at a really fairly high frame rate, so they capture really solid. Now I'm going to go to a different shot here. Here is the other one, and you can actually see where that movement is, how blurry that background is, right, where there's actually movement. None of those shots are actually seem like they're in focus. Even though this was shot the same as the other one, both shot at f4 on a 24 to 105 lens. But you can definitely see with those frames that motion blur that's happening here in the background. And that's that look that we're looking for, because when it plays back, it just looks much smoother. Really, really important, because if not, we get this really choppy look versus a nice smooth look. Because even though it looks blurry in a static shot, that's not what we're going to be seeing. We're going to be seeing movement. Now, the other thing that's really important is when you and I are doing photos. Middle of the day, you and I take our cameras, and if we want to do just standard snapshots, do you need an ND filter? Probably not necessarily, especially if you're just trying to be quick. But if you're trying to really set up a shot and get some, especially long exposure shots, this is where you and I can really use something like this. Being able to take this and make it as dark as possible. So this one I got up to an ND 32, which is dark as I could take it. The lens would go up to f22. I bought my ISO as low as possible, and I was able to capture a shot that looked like, see if I can find it here, this one here. And if you look at this, for instance, especially if I bring this full screen, you get that, look at that nice background blur, because I could actually get this shot. And this shot wasn't actually exposed over too long of a period. You can actually see right here, it was actually set at 0.5 of a second. But because there's so much movement, that water's moving so fast, you get this amazing, lovely blur in there, which normally, no way I would be able to get this. This shot, actually, when I took it with just a normal, same lens, but no ND filter, ended up looking like this. So you have this shot here, again, you can see the settings, but 1/50th of a second versus almost shooting a full second. So you get much more control over that shot. And again, because I have this, it's really easy for me to just kind of flip this up and be like, I'm gonna take a shot, no ND filter, take a shot with ND filter, and have all those stops in between. So I can go from 0 all the way up to 32. I do think it's not a big investment to get a variable ND filter. Now, you wanna make sure that you get a decent one. I've bought some cheap ones, and some of them were actually not too bad. Some of them were not too good. This one I've actually been very happy with. Now, of course, when you're doing photography with an ND filter and you're doing long exposure, make sure that you are shooting with a tripod. I actually have a new tripod coming right away, so I will be testing that just to see, again, from K&F. That should be coming up soon. But I think if you are looking for cinematic shots, lighting becomes really important. And when we're shooting outside especially, lighting's something that you and I can't necessarily control. So we need something to be able to put in front of the lens to gain some of that control back. And a variable ND filter is super important. And this one by K&F, I've been very, very happy with. No complaints. It's a win. You should get it to help you make some more cinematic magic with your camera. All right, guys, I'm gonna leave you there. Wanted to give you just that little extra piece of information, and I wanted to show you this thing especially. I think this is really cool because, again, like for me, ND filter, in my head, I know it's a great idea to shoot outdoors with an ND filter on pretty much all the time. I get it. But I'm just like, but there's so many times I don't want to have to deal with it. That makes me not have to deal with it. I can just flip it up when I don't need it, flip it back when I do. I'll put links to the ND filter and a little filter system, I guess. Make sure, again, if you're only gonna buy one filter, find out which diameter is kind of the biggest one that you have for your lenses, and then look at things like step-up rings. I think those are usually very budget-friendly way of doing it. Links down below, guys. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you tomorrow with some more stuff. Yeah. All right, my friends. Later.